Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
In this thread, personal UFO experience. No, my friend's friend saw one bullshit. A few years back, when I was probably 10 and 20 now, my family went out for a drive to the city. We pull up at this stoplight in the middle of the business district, and my stepdad points out there's a sundog in the sky. The sundog is a sky phenomenon where the sun appears to have a halo and some spots on it. I'd never seen one before, so me and my family were all staring at it. Then from behind it, this bizarre craft poked out. My stepdad pointed it out and we were all perplexed. We watched it meander around for a while, but we came to our destination and got out. Later, after we had finished shopping, we got back in the car and it was still floating around. As we headed back home, the craft appeared to follow us, coming close enough so that I could tell without a doubt that it was round instead of the regular aircraft shapes. It was metallic and seemed to hover wherever it pleased. Soon, it disappeared as we made it close to home. I'm not sure what it was, and my family really never talked about it. I'm sure they've all forgotten by now, but I remember it very clearly. For the record, I don't believe in aliens coming to Earth, and I don't know what to make of the craft I saw. I guess I'll never know.
I was driving across the mountains in Colorado with my family. Father, mother, bro, and sis. I was in the back seat, looking out my window, looking over the flowing trees below the mountain. All of a sudden, a huge shadow moved over the mountain and trees in the direction I was looking. WTF? I said, and I looked around in the sky, not a cloud or plane. I was extremely confused with it. It couldn't honestly be a UFO. The size of the shadow was huge, mile wide, but due to the velocity of the shadow, I can't estimate length. I haven't talked about it due to me being a skeptic, but with the confused look my dad had after that in the car, it makes me a bit more sure of something more. True story.
I've told this story on X before. When I was around 10 or 11, my mom had heard of this place about a mile or two out of town that was a shooting range, so we drove out there to check it out, but when we got there it was just a bunch of empty drums on posts. And it was getting dark, so she decided we should go home. On the way back, about half a mile from our house, a big saucer-shaped thing flew over our car, and by over I mean within 10 to 20 feet. She kept driving and I said let's turn back and look again, and she agreed and turned around. This time it was in a field about half a block from the road, and it was doing that rotating lights thing, and a door was opening in the bottom with light coming out, and my mom kept driving, and so we came around for another pass. This time they were standing outside their ship talking to each other or something, but they noticed us as we went by and I got a good look. They were about 3 or 4 feet tall and stubby looking. White NASA looking suits with no markings, square helmets, small backpack. They had green faces with small red glowing eyes and long mouths. Their heads looked kinda square, but that might just have been from the helmets. When I said to my mom, let's go back. Again, she said she couldn't cause all of a sudden her knee started hurting her real bad and she needed to get home. When we got back, I called 911 and asked them to send a cop ASAP, and when the cop got there I explained, but remembering it now, the cop got there fast as hell cause we were still bringing in groceries from the car. The cop never came back to tell us anything, and I don't remember hearing about it in the news.
Currently 18, but when I was about 12, I invited my friends over one day. I have about 3 acres of wooded land that belongs to my family, which my friends walked through to get to my house. They claimed on the way there they saw this all-white humanoid figure that took off. A few years later, I was walking back home from a friend's house. I was walking kind of fast, but then out of the corner of my eye I saw this white humanoid figure. I looked at it for a split second. It looked at me. I took off as fast as I could and never looked back. I still have no idea what the hell I saw, just a white humanoid figure with black and a small, opened mouth.
Not exactly a UFO for sure, but I shot bricks. When I was about 14. 3 years ago, I was in bed and I saw a greenish light faintly shining through the edges of my blinds. Naturally, I got up and looked out. I saw a huge lime green flaming ball of light, with a red sparky trail. I just sat there and stared at it in awe as it moved across the sky at a medium kind of pace, then it disappeared behind the roof of the house next door. It was semi-low in the sky. I know that it wasn't a plane, it was too big. It was probably just a comet or something like that, but it was still the coolest thing I've ever seen. I never learned what it was, and it wasn't in the news or anything, and I've never encountered anyone who's seen it or something similar.
Years ago, during one of the meteor showers here in Canada, me and my family were oddly enough watching Star Wars. So we went outside to watch and it was awesome. Then it ended. Then we were looking out the window and my bro saw a red star that would move, then stop, then move slowly, then stop. Then we all watched it and it just shot off, really fast. We were like WTF and we went outside and some meteors were still going. We saw a bunch of weird things. A few white stars and a few red ones that moved unlike any helicopter or airplane we'd ever seen. My brothers got bored and said it was just helicopters and went back inside, but me and my mom stayed out for a while and heard this weird hummy propeller noise, but there were no helicopters or planes anywhere except for some weird lights, and then out of nowhere this huge blimp thing. Well, it looked kinda like a blimp. I've only seen them on TV. It's a small town so we don't get much blimps, especially at like midnight, and we watched it for a while until it just faded away. So ever since then I used to have this huge obsession with looking at the sky at night, even during school nights. I stayed up really late just staring with a pair of binoculars beside me. I slept on a couch, which was positioned beside a huge window that took up most of the wall. A couple times, maybe a couple times a week, I saw some things that looked like UFOs but just could have been planes. I tried to see with my binoculars and it looked really small, but also like the cliche UFOs that have the lights swirling around them. I tried to get my bros to look, but they just said I was stupid and that aliens have better things to do than visit Earth. Anyway, I kept watching every night. I saw the same weird red lights. Then one night I saw the most messed up thing ever. From the left, a slow-moving bright star that was abnormally big and bright drifted by towards the moon. Two others came out of nowhere and they all stopped beside the moon in some weird triangle formation. It was a little past midnight, and I was just staring there in awe in a dark room, almost shitting my pants thinking that at any second they'd see me watching and shoot towards the window, come into my house and take me away. Anyway, they just sat there in that triangle formation for the longest time, maybe half an hour. I didn't even need my binoculars to see them. Then they just slowly disbanded and headed in different directions. I sat there dumbfounded wondering WTF it was that I saw. I tried telling people, but of course they didn't believe me. I have no idea what it was, or what they were doing, why they stayed around the moon, etc. Unlike any airplanes I've seen, that's for sure. And I guess that's my story. I haven't stared much at the sky anymore, especially since we moved and I have no big windows to stare out at.
I was with my friend in his truck. It was really damn late at night and we were driving to a 24-hour store because it was the weekend. We were dumb, young, and bored. Anyway, we're way out in the country on our way there, no lights along the road or anything. I happened to glance up and out of the windshield and I saw the moon. No big deal. We had been talking for a while and going probably around 60 miles per hour. A few minutes later I glance over out my window and I see the moon. I think, that's strange, we have been going straight. I lean forward just a bit more and look out through the top of the windshield and there is the moon again. Now I realize it must be a helicopter with a searchlight on or something. I'm looking at it for almost a full minute while we are driving and I start thinking, hey, if it were a searchlight wouldn't I see the beam of light instead of just a glow? But it's just sitting there, so it's either really damn far away and huge so it seems like it's not moving, or it's really close and must be exactly matching our speed. About the time I have this realization it zips away and leaves a trail cutting the entire sky in half. I'm stunned, so I just sit back. I didn't know what to say, but all in all it must have been in that same position for at least 5 or 10 minutes. I finally glanced at my friend and he looked at me and back at the road. I said, "Did you see that?" And he said yes. I asked what he saw and he said, "The same thing you did." We didn't speak of it again.
I've got 2 stories. Once back when I was 18, I was out with some friends in the mountains. Was a clear sky, the moon was out, and plenty of stars. No light pollution in small towns. Well, we were all looking up at the stars, when I noticed a purple star. Purple is my favorite color, so I was staring at it for a little while. After a few minutes, I noticed the star began to slowly move to the left. Then it slowly moved back to the right. It repeated this motion for about 10 seconds, when it moved to the left once more, then shot off to the right, and disappeared. I stared there for a moment, not realizing what I just saw. When it dawned on me, I couldn't help but scream it out to everyone else. Second story. Back in high school, my friends, and I would drive to Colorado Springs to hang out on the weekends. Well, one night while driving home, around 11 p.m., we were only a few miles outside of the city limits. I'm sitting there, staring off into the distance, when I noticed a light over some open land, next to a small building. I didn't think much of it, until my friend pointed it out, asked me what it was. I looked at it, and told him that it's just a star over the ground, don't worry about it, just drive. He then told me how it's moving with the horizon, like something closer than a star, rather than remaining mostly in the same spot. I noticed he was right, it had to be much closer than a star. So, being the Scully that I was, I told him that it's just a light on top of a tower, just to show planes that it's there, don't worry about it, just drive. Then a moment later I heard, oh shit, looked over, and that same light started moving up into the sky. Once it reached a high altitude, it then split into 4 smaller lights, and they all shot out into the night. A few minutes later, we could hear military jets flying over us in the direction the lights shot off at.
I was sitting back, thinking about alien abductions, and I suddenly had an encounter with aliens. I won't say it is entirely true because of the circumstances, but it is the closest thing I've come to alien contact. I was probably about 12, and I was having trouble sleeping in my bed, so I went down the stairs and slept in the guest room around 1 a.m. I remember the bed feeling very warm and inviting. I don't remember my dream, but I remember having the most sensational feeling that the room was closing in on me. My dream, although I remember no visuals or sounds at all, conveyed the feeling of being walled in. It was the feeling that it was hard to breathe. This is understandable because I was hospitalized for asthma when I was around 7, and I was still having problems. The strange part about the whole thing was, I had a false awakening during the nighttime. It was probably 6 a.m., so just before dawn, but light outside. During this false awakening, I open my eyes and I see 2 or 3 grays in the room with me. This scared the shit out of me, so I closed my eyes again. I wake up normally around 10 p.m. and hardly remember anything. Thinking back, one was right up close, near my face, and there were 2 standing near the rather large window. I'm not sure why grays scare me, especially because they have done me no harm.
I am currently 96 years old, but my memory is still intact and sharp. I live outside Piedmont, Missouri on a farm that has been in the family since the 1850s. I lived there with my mother, father, grandmother, and siblings. When I was a kid, whoever was the youngest had to sleep on the sleeping porch of the house. None of us wanted to sleep there because the little people would visit and we were all afraid of them. I remember that my mother and grandmother told stories about the little gray people who visited the farm at night, and that the stories were in the family since before the Civil War. One night in particular, August 10, 1930, when I was 10 years old, I was laying in bed on the porch and I saw a gray being with big eyes walk up to the window and look inside at me. I was frozen in fear. It just kept looking at me. The next thing I knew, there were 3 of them, all about 4 feet tall with no hair, big black eyes, small nose and mouth, and thin, standing next to my bed, and I remember thinking that I had no idea how they got inside. I was even more afraid and wanted to pull the covers up over my face but couldn't. I don't know what happened after that. The next morning I woke up and they were gone. They never appeared during the day, only at night. I never saw a craft of any type. But sometimes late at night we would hear a humming sound coming from the low depression area around the pond about 100 feet from the house, but never went to look to see what it was. I think we were afraid too. We also often saw small white balls of light in the yard and around the farm at dusk and after dusk, but never knew what they were. The lights were about the size of a softball. The whole family was sure to be inside after dark, and we just didn't play outside after dark. The older family members made sure we came inside, and as I think back on this, it must have been because of the little people who would take us. That is the term my mother and grandmother used. They would say that the little gray people would take us at night but always brought us back before morning. It was almost like talking about fairies or something magical that was our little secret. It was not something we spoke about to other people. We kept it to ourselves and still do to this day. I still see them sometimes, only inside the house where I sleep now. I see them coming late at night, usually around 3 a.m., but for some reason I just fall asleep and don't remember any interaction with them. I don't let anyone sleep on the porch, though. My children and grandchildren have also seen the gray people. We are not so afraid of them anymore, just look at them as being visitors rather than something that will harm us. I don't want any publicity or anyone to know who I am because they'll think I'm nuts, but I'm not. I may be old, but I am strong and take care of myself and have all my faculties.
During the summer of 1994, my husband and I purchased a newly built home in a Sacramento Valley, California subdivision. We moved in with our 4-year-old son and our soon-to-arrive baby daughter. The house was located at the end of the street with a lot of undeveloped land behind us. Our son adjusted quickly, and he made many new friends. The neighborhood kids played on the street since there was no traffic during the day while most people were at work. Unfortunately, my husband was not able to find a job in Sacramento right away. He would stay with his mom back in the Bay Area during the work week, and then he would drive back to the valley to check in on us. That's when we would do our grocery shopping and other errands at that time. We only had one car and I was left stranded until he was back for the weekend. On a particular Monday, after he left early for his commute to work, I felt uneasy and scared, but I didn't know why. I decided to go back to our bedroom and lay down. I soon fell asleep, but I had a horrible nightmare. I dreamt that our son was missing and that we were running to different streets looking for him and calling out his name. I woke up suddenly and was relieved that it was just a horrible dream and my boy was fast asleep next to me. The baby was still in her bassinet next to the bed. I turned over on my side facing the bassinet and noticed a bright light coming in between the window blinds. I thought out loud, "Is it morning already?" The light was coming in between the blinds and it was so bright, but the rest of the room was dark. There was also a bright light on the wall next to the window and I looked up to see where the light was coming from. To my horror, just above the bassinet was an alien gray's face. It was just the head, no upper body, legs, or arms. The head was dark in color, very round, ending in a pointed chin, and there was a small slit for a mouth. The nostrils were small, but the eyes were large and almond-shaped and very shiny black. It had some sort of glass lamp on the top of its head. The light on the wall was projected from the lamp. Then I noticed that the being was looking down at my baby daughter. Oh my God, I couldn't speak. My heart started pounding so hard that I started trembling uncontrollably. It saw me and realized I was looking at it. The being moved toward me and I started screaming and swinging my arms. I remember that I screamed out loud for it to leave. It floated from its original position above the bassinet to just above my face. I remember seeing this light blue fog build up in front of my face. And then, in a dreamlike manner, I heard a cooing sound, similar to mourning doves. I had the feeling that whoever was talking to me was stern and was telling me that it was for our own good. Then I woke up. It was still dark out, but it was around 6 a.m. and the blankets were perfectly made around the bed like nothing had happened. Everything was still. My son was asleep next to me and the baby was in her bassinet. I got out of bed and turned all the lights on in the bedroom. Then I walked through the house and turned on every light I could in order to check each room and closet. I checked the locks on all the doors, the lock on the backyard sliding glass door, and all of the windows were latched. Nothing had been tampered with. I decided to go to the bathroom and shower. When I was washing my hair, I felt a sore spot on the top of my head. There was no blood or swelling bump, but it was very sore. I got dressed and walked to the kitchen. I made some coffee, then sat at the counter while trying to make sense of all those events I perceived. I thought about the nightmare that I had woken up from and how relieved I had felt that it had just been a bad dream. But then that being was there and I couldn't decide if it had been another bad dream or if that second part was actually real. It didn't make sense. My son was up at 9 a.m. and I kept checking in on the baby. She continued sleeping, which I thought was strange. She should have been up to nurse hours earlier. I called my sister and told her about my dream. I started crying because it seemed like it had been real. But I kept thinking that it couldn't be real. I checked on the baby. She seemed fine. There was no fever or any other problem. She did not wake up to nurse until 2 p.m. that afternoon. By then I was sore and engorged with milk. As the day progressed, I became anxious, and before it was evening I again called my sister asking if she could come over and pick us up. I didn't want to be there alone with the kids at night. She drove over and took us to her apartment. My sister wasn't sure what to make of this whole situation. I called my husband and told him about my bad dream, but he thought it was just stress from being left alone so many nights and taking care of the kids. He picked us up from my sister's place and drove us back to our house that evening. I tried to go about my normal routine of making dinner, bathing the kids before bed, and watching a movie. It was soon time for me and my husband to go to bed, so I put both kids in the bed between us. I was terrified that it would come back, that I would wake up and that face would be there looking back at me. My husband continued to commute for another 6 months, so I was still alone in the evening. That was the worst part for weeks. Every night I would stay up just until I could see daylight before I felt safe enough to fall asleep. I would leave the TV and the bedroom lights on and fight sleep until I would see the early sunlight peek through the windows. I went on like this for 3 years. My husband would just tell me that it had been a bad dream. But after a few months, he didn't like for me to talk about it. My daughter was only 3 months old when this happened. She doesn't have any strange scars or ill effects from the experience. But I know that it was not a dream in regard to the encounter with the alien being. I just pray that it never happens again. But, for some unexplained reason, I believe that it will. I feel that my children and I are destined to have more encounters during our lives. The fear of the unknown is more frightening than the actual experience.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.